Hi, I'm James Cole, the producer and director of Lost Black Earth. Hopefully on this commentary track I can give you a bit of insight into all that went on while we were making this project and how we pulled it together for practically no money at all. I think at the end of the day we'd spent about $10,000 Australian on the whole project. I remember one of the early sound mixes we had on this Hysteria Productions logo. We had the full range of sound effects, the thunder, the little tinkles on the light, and the big whooshes as the letters come past. And after a couple of viewings I thought it was too much, and just really liked what Matt Ferrugia had done with the music, how it just built and built and built and built, and gave a much more of an impact when you first see this laser beam come through. Now this opening sequence was actually one of the last sequences to be completed. Because of the type of CG work in it, and the fact that most of the shots are purely CG, I really wanted to refine my skills before I even attempted to put it together. These interiors are shot inside a wheat silo in the sunshine area, which we dressed up, and Clint Dodd, our special effects guy, put some little explosive charges in there which were pretty effective. I remember when we were shooting this stuff I was thinking that we probably wouldn't even be able to use it because I had no idea how to do the effects at that stage, and even if we could get anyone else to do them. So I shot it just in case, and the just in case paid off. If you rewind just a few seconds and have a look at the shot, you'll see where one of our stunt guys, Daryl Morfitt, does a fall inside the space station. That wasn't written in the script at all, or wasn't even planned for on the day, but when we got to the location and Clint saw the setup there, he said, he came to me and asked me, do you want someone to fall down the middle? I thought, can you do that? He said yes. So I thought, great, let's do it. And it actually only took him 15 minutes to set it up, which was fantastic. Now I guess before these models disappear I should talk a little bit about them. We originally tried out some computer 3D stuff which didn't work at all. Then one day Colin Paxman, who'd helped out a lot during the actual production, came over and he bought this little miniature space pod that he'd created for a short film he was going to make, but it never got off the ground. And I looked at it and thought this would be great for the escape pod for Myola. So I asked him if I could use it, and he agreed, and to make it even better he offered to make the other miniatures that we required, being the Noagen space station and the Chrysalim ship. We actually filmed the miniatures about 3 separate ways because it just wasn't working. We started off trying to shoot it against a green screen, but because we were shooting on mini DV, it didn't hold up too good, and we just couldn't get a matte off the footage that was good enough. You end up with soft edges around everything and it just looks ugly. So we tried a different approach where we went out to a soccer field one night and shot it with the models lit really well and against the black sky, and tried keying it that way, and that didn't work because we couldn't get the camera stable enough, so it looked like handheld shots in space, which wasn't the look I was going for. So the third approach, which was the one we used, was to just take still shots of the actual miniatures and then cut around them in Photoshop and then animate them in the software on the computer. All the flashing lights and explosions and other things that you see are all being added in the computer as well. One of the conditions that Colin gave me when he built the miniatures for me was that I couldn't blow them up for real. And when it came time to do the Noagen space station, one of the key shots in the sequence is when it explodes at the end. And so we did that all in the computer by breaking it apart into lots of different bits and using particle programs to actually make it explode. and then added stock footage of fire and explosions over the top of it, which worked pretty well. One of the things I tried to create throughout the movie is this feeling of uneasiness and being uncomfortable. One of the ideas I had of achieving this was to actually replace the clouds in a lot of the shots and have them on a slightly different perspective to what they should have been. So you kind of look at it and think there's something wrong there, but you're not quite sure what it is. Also with these shots, the mountains and obviously the city have been replaced as well, because they're actually just walking through an empty field. Now this old abandoned rundown house is actually in the middle of the same field they're just walking through, and I think it's home to a lot of the cows that live there. I think someone got some good behind the scenes footage of me treading on a rotten board and actually falling through the floor at one stage. And I think a lot of the crew that were working there, because this was our first day of shooting, just didn't know whether to laugh or not. Needless to say, this wasn't the last dumbass thing that I managed to do in front of the camera. Hopefully the footage will mysteriously disappear. Now that sticker that they just looked at, which reads "Join the Army," wasn't a prop. We actually found that in the house, and I thought it fitted so perfectly with the story being set in a post-apocalyptic world after many wars have ravaged the place. With all the locations that we filmed in, we tried to get permission as much as possible. I think there only ended up being 2 locations that we couldn't find the people that owned it or looked after it to actually get permission, and this house was one of them. And sure enough, on the day that we were filming, the owner turned up, this elderly lady who looks after the cows in the field, and suddenly there's a film crew on her property of about 30 people standing around eating dinner, and she just didn't know what was going on. Anyway, after some smooth talking from John Trappier, my first AD, she allowed us to stick around, which was good, as long as we didn't harm the cows, which we didn't. Except for this one coming up, where we actually found this skull of a cow in the field and thought, looks perfect, let's put it in there somewhere. When we originally came up with the idea for Lost, it was actually the first part of a massive trilogy that was just way too big for us to make with no money. So after much scrutinising of the script, we actually decided to take just a subplot out of the first story and create that as this self-contained little movie. One of the reasons we actually made the movie was to prove that we could make a movie. Before Lost came about, Chris Daniels and myself were actually getting another script out to people called Dignity, and we had a number of people interested in it, but understandably none were interested in taking it on with me attached as the director, pretty much because I had nothing to show for it other than a few dodgy music videos and some even worse little short 5-minute films. One of the reasons why I chose this beach location that they're walking along is because when I was doing my location hunting, it appeared to have everything I needed for the scene, which was a great look. It actually had the tree line and then a very thin strip of sand and then the ocean, and then at one end of the beach there was a river leading into the ocean, which as they're running away they needed to come up to this river, so they couldn't cross it and had to run into the forest. But as it turns out, the day that I was location hunting, it was actually a king tide. So when we came to actually shoot there was a lot less water, and pretty much the whole lot was just mud flats, as you can see there. And the river that made the location perfect was all dried up. So when you actually see the shot, I had to get them to run up to a line that I'd drawn in the sand and act as if there was a river there, and then later on I got some footage of an actual river and then just composited it into the shot. I remember the crew looking at me strangely, wondering what I was doing, which became a common occurrence throughout the filming, with all the digital stuff that was going to be added later. This is the river shot here. Now this shot here where the explosion goes off, we used air cannons, because at this stage Clint Dodd, who was the special effects guy, didn't have his pyrotechnician's license, so we couldn't use real explosives, and George Novak, our stunt coordinator, had these air cannons, which was perfect. Gave the perfect look to it. It's probably a bit excessive for a little laser gun, but hey, it's a movie, it looks good. Another reason was a lot of this forest stuff was actually shot in national parks, so you're not allowed to have explosions or anything like that there. So now one of the things that I did with the sound, and I knew pretty early on that I was going to have to do, was to replace everything. When we're filming like this stuff, it's actually right next to a main road, and you've got trucks going past and planes flying over the top and every kind of noise that you didn't want in a post-apocalyptic movie. I didn't even want any bird sounds in there because I wanted it to sound really dead and lifeless. So the decision was made that we were going to re-record the dialogue and replace every sound in there, which turned out to be a pretty big job. I think it was bigger than we first expected it to be, especially when you get into the nitty-gritty of replacing every single footstep and trying to sync it up and get it to sound right. And I'd go out and grab whoever was around at the time to help do these footsteps, and we'd go to different places where there's all these different surfaces and take a microphone and recorder and just stand there making footsteps and doing jumping and roll sounds, and I'm sure we look like a bunch of idiots, but I think that's just one of the things you got to expect when you're making a movie. This scene was shot right at the end of the day, and if we were shooting on film, there's no way we could have got away with it, because we were too far away from the generators to get lights there, and we literally had about 15 minutes to shoot this scene. And then from this scene we cut to another scene that was shot in bright sunny daylight, as you can see from the shadows behind them, and just through the colour grading tried to match it as good as you can. But one of the biggest problems with this was we shot it on weekends only over about 6 months, and the lighting conditions, the weather conditions were constantly changing, which in a way kind of works for the story because it makes you feel like the landscape's more volatile than it is. But it was a big effort to try and colour grade everything to match and have some sort of consistency to it. The teleporting is a fairly straightforward effect. We'd shoot the scene twice, once with the actors there, once without, and then do a split screen between the actors that have to teleport in and the ones that are staying there, and then dissolve over the area where the guys are teleporting in, and then just add those little animation bits over the top of that. This little stunt coming up with Clint running away here, he was waiting for me to call out for him to do the jump, and I left it a little bit too long, and when he jumped he actually landed on a rock, and the following week when he came on set he actually showed me his shoulder and it was completely black. This shot here of the sword was actually Rick Idak's idea, who was one of the camera guys. He just laid on his back and got the stunt guys to throw it up above him, and I couldn't watch. I thought the sword was going to come back down and go through him, but the stunt guys caught it, which was good. They had big thick gloves on, and I think it scared the crap out of Rick because he got up pretty quick and wouldn't do it again. But hey, the shot looks great. This whole action scene I'm less than happy with. It was the first real action sequence that we shot, and it just doesn't live up to the standard of the rest of the movie, I don't think. But unfortunately, it needs to be there, and we couldn't go back and reshoot. A lot of people ask me where we got the actors from for the project. And early on, we actually got a lot of newspaper articles done in local newspapers, and that led to getting hundreds of phone calls from people at ridiculous hours of the day. From that, we got a lot of the actors. I'd already worked with Jamie, who plays Wes, on a number of other little short films, and I had edited a film with Mary Anthe, who plays Myola, in it, which is where she came from. Peter Davis here, who plays Fergus, was a last-minute addition. We actually had Chris Daniels, who wrote and co-produced the movie with me. He was originally going to play Fergus because he's a pretty wacky character, and then Peter came along from an agent that we had contacted, and he just looked the part and fit it perfectly. So Chris sacked himself and we put Peter in there instead. I think Chris regrets these days not having even a cameo in there. A lot of these extra shots here I got sometime later, just driving around up in the snowy mountains and up in the Dandenong Mountains and places like that, and they all blended together to fit in pretty well. A lot of these wider shots of them carrying Gart, I love that shot there. It looks like they're walking out of a mouth of some strange tribal creature. Yeah, a lot of them were shot second unit because we were running out of time, so I sent I think it was John Trappier off with Anthony there, who was another one of the camera guys, and they came back with all this footage, which was great. And I think that mixed with the great bit of music that Matt had written for this, it really brings out the emotion of the scene. With the music, I originally approached Matt and told him I wanted like tribal Native American music mixed with Nine Inch Nails, and he did this little piece for a teaser that we were putting together, and it was spot on with what I wanted. So I approached him to put together the whole soundtrack, and it took me a year to convince him, but eventually he came around, and I think he did an amazing job. He did all of it except this next track coming up, which I originally had for the temp track. I had a Clannad track there, which fit perfectly, and I was just not, once I put it there, I was not willing to let it go. And it got down to the last minute, and we couldn't get the rights for it. Universal wouldn't even return our phone calls about it. And so I got together with another guy, Brodie Gravel, and we came up with this track together, which fits really well, and it's actually a lot more inspirational than the Clannad track, but you know, I still prefer the Clannad one. I'll get over it eventually. This sequence I actually edited together blind. Not literally blind, but I didn't play it back at all. I just got all the different layers and cut them together, and when it was all done, I hit render, and I think it took about 4 hours to render because there was so many different layers involved. And when I eventually got to play it back, it just came out perfect, and it was the only scene that I didn't do any fine tuning on. It's great when it works out like that. Doesn't work out like that very often though. There's a little mosquito that flies in front of Jamie here, which, there it goes, which I always thought was Gart's soul flying away. This tree that they're at as well is my favourite tree in the whole world. It's this massive tree, and it's got all these lumps and distortions all over it. It's in the middle of Sherbrooke Forest in the Dandenong Ranges, and I had to beg and plead to get permission to actually shoot there, because it was in the middle of lyrebird season, and eventually talked him into letting us there, which was good. This location we use for Fort Fergus is actually a old bluestone toilet block in the middle of, actually it's not far from Sherbrooke Forest, and we just whacked the sign on the front and took the toilet signs off, and there it is. The interior is actually about 300 kilometres away. This older abandoned building that we found, which kind of matched, this is the other building now, which we dressed with all of Fergus's paraphernalia, which actually came from Karsha, who was a costume designer who tended to pick dead animals up off the side of the road and turn them into clothes, which, odd as it may be, it worked perfectly for the movie. And there's a lot of stuff on the walls there. When we were actually at this location, a tree fell down for no reason whatsoever and smashed on a car that was driving past, so production stopped for about 4 or 5 hours while we were dealing with that. Luckily no one got injured, but the chainsaws that came to cut the tree up pretty much meant that we couldn't record anything. The sunglasses that Jamie's wearing there became a bit of an ordeal throughout production, because he kept breaking them, sitting on them or dropping them or whatever, and we actually went through about 5 or 6 different pairs of completely different sunglasses. And I remember on one day he threw a tantrum because he was so sure that everybody was going to pick it and the movie would be wrecked because of these sunglasses would suddenly be different. But, you know, playing back the footage, I couldn't even pick where they changed. One of the things with re-recording the dialogue, I didn't get the actors back that only had a few lines, so they're actually different people's voices on them, which to start with is kind of weird watching them when you've heard their voices for so long, but now it's almost getting to the point when I hear them normally, I think they sound weird. I think I did about 10 different voices throughout the whole movie, including a couple of the creature sound effects, and Chris Daniels actually does the voice of Jose here, because by the time we got to re-record the voices, Cameron Plant, who plays Jose, had moved to another state and couldn't get back to re-record. And Colin Paxman does one of the voices of the Chrislam Lieutenant. This scene here was shot in the middle of the day with no rain and no lightning. All of that was added digitally, as you can see by the fact that they're not getting wet. But I think it takes a couple of times to actually pick that, and if you're just watching it and you're into the movie, you don't actually notice it. It's just another element that adds to the mood that we were trying to create, with all the rain and sound effects that go with it. This shot here was actually one of the only dolly shots that we had in the movie. When we started the project, we wanted to have a lot more of camera movement, fluid movement, and Rick was getting a dolly made up, and it wasn't actually completed till about halfway through the shoot, and he brought it down and I said, alright, let's use it for this shot, and it took him about 3 hours to set it up, so after that I decided we weren't going to use it again. A lot of the subtle camera movement, like that slow push in that we just had then, is actually created in the computer afterwards. And because I decided to, we actually shot the movie 16:9 and then cropped it down to 2.35 to 1 ratio to give it that more cinematic look. One of the things we were able to do is create the movement digitally because we had the extra space of the image top and bottom to play with. So we got a lot nicer shots than we originally had just by adding slow tilts and pans and pushes in. This scene coming up with Jamie doing his martial arts impression. He actually did have a couple of months of training with a guy, and yeah, I don't know what happened. He just kind of looks funny when he's doing it. Hence the reason the crossfades are in there, to sort of hide it a little. This scene, this little bit coming up with Fergus, where he coughs up the snot. He just couldn't get the sound that I was after, which was really odd. That bit there. And so I remember when we were re-recording the voices, I had to go in there and actually record that little bit myself. I'm well versed in being disgusting.
You went out like the sun in winter. You're right now, your memory's coming back. Come with me.
Where are we going?
To get breakfast.
This scene here, where they're sitting around eating a chicken and talking. Chicken's actually supposed to be some other strange creature that's never mentioned, but it looks like chicken because it is chicken. This was actually one of the most painful days of the whole shoot, for so many reasons. One of the big ones being none of the actors actually learned any of their lines, so we're having to actually hand feed them off camera, one line at a time, which seemed to take forever. The other was keeping the fire going, because everything was damp and wet in this forest. The fire just wouldn't stay alight, so every time we'd stop for a take, Chris would run in and sit down and be blowing on it and fanning it and trying to keep it going, and trying to keep a fire look consistent for an entire day of filming is pretty tricky. This scene was originally about a 12-minute dialogue piece, which when we came to edit it, it was just too long and boring and tedious. A lot of it was originally meant to be filled up with flashback sequences, which we just couldn't afford to actually film. So instead of that, we cut the dialogue down and ended up with I think about 2.5 minutes all up. It's interesting once you're in the edit suite how you can rearrange and almost rewrite the story as you go. This scene in the script actually came before the scene that we've just seen, where Fergus says, "Let's get breakfast." This was actually supposed to be set in the evening before, where they're eating dinner, and then they wake up and Wes is doing his fancy stuff. But for some reason, it just seemed to play out better when it was this way around. When we were shooting on this day, we actually didn't have access to any of the cameras we'd been using. We'd been using the Sony DSR 200 DV cam cameras. So on this day we used, I think it was a Sony TRV 900, which belonged to Brad Strain, who was shooting a lot of our behind the scenes stuff. And it had a very different look to it, a much wider angle lens on it. But I think it actually works again. Once again, it's another one of those things that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable because it's suddenly different and you're not really sure why. because it's not enough of a difference to actually pick it. This sequence coming up here, where they're on the cliff face. The last shot on the cliff face is where it actually pulls back to reveal them halfway up this cliff. It's actually one of the only effect shots that wasn't done in a computer. It was actually done in camera. They're actually standing on a grass ledge, which is probably 100 meters or so wide, and then below that there's another cliff face, and then another grass ledge, and we're actually standing on the bottom one and had it lined up so you couldn't see the grass ledge that they're standing on, although you can a little bit in the right hand side, if you know what you're looking for. And that gave the effect that they were halfway up a cliff shot. Now, this shot here where they're in the snow, I originally wanted to shoot actually in the snow, but we couldn't get all the cast together on a day when we could go up there. And I really wanted this shot in there, and I ummed and ahed about it for quite a while because I knew it was going to be quite an effort to do it. But I eventually got a shot where they're walking through a field together and rotoscoped them out of that, and then created this digital landscape of the snow and the environment and put them into it. I think all up the shot took about 2 weeks to create. All of the people that worked on it, the cast and the crew, actually volunteered their time to get the movie made, because we couldn't afford to pay anyone. And a lot of the people, it was actually their first project working on a movie, and I think they learned a lot about it as I did myself. But we also had a few professional people on there who had worked on a lot of projects, like George Novak from Stunts Unlimited, and Clint Dodd, who did the effects and cable rigging and stuff, and Chris Burkett, who was our production manager, helped organise a lot of the stuff. And they all came about through various ways, and liked the project and wanted to get involved. I think we had, the most we had at any one day was about 50 people on set, which was one of the end scenes where there's the extras and that as well. And a couple of times I'd step back and just think it was amazing that all these people were coming together for no money just to make this movie. This location here is one of my favourites, with the bridge. This whole sequence where they have the fight and escape the soldiers yet again was supposed to take place in the forest where Fergus and Jose go off to have a whiz. And when I found this location, I thought, I've got to have a fight scene on the top of this. It would be great. The guy with the gun there behind Jamie is actually Daryl Morfitt, and if you look carefully, you'll see him pop up all the way through the movie. He's the guy that constantly keeps dying. I think he dies about 4 or 5 times. He jumped off down the inside of the space station. This one here, he dies again on the beach at the end, and I'm sure there's a couple other times as well. The whole stunt team was great on this. That was Clint doing the fall off the bridge. They really brought it to another level, which we wouldn't have been able to do without them, which was great. The reason why we actually got the stunt guys was they're all trainees. George Novak had run a stunt course, and Daryl and another guy, James Bond, and Ian and Graz and a couple other guys were all trainees at the time, looking to get experience any way they could, so that's how they came into the project. That sequence there with Fergus coming in saying, "Did I miss something?" Was one of those moments where you got to rewrite the script on the spur of the moment. We had him all in costume ready to go. The actual scene read that he came in and saved the day with his big gun and took out all the Chrislam soldiers and that. And when we got him there in costume, he got a phone call that his father had died and he had to leave. So I, being the selfish director that I am, asked him to give me 5 minutes of his time just to get a shot so I could complete the scene. And so I just shot him saying, did I miss something? And then rewrote the action scene to have the other guys clean up, and then he comes in at the end, and I think it's actually one of the funniest bits in the movie now. This sequence here in the abandoned service station was actually the other location we couldn't get permission for. We couldn't find who owned it or anything, so we just turned up and broke in, and nobody seemed to care. Coming up just in a minute is an example of where you can fix things and clean them up with re-recording the dialogue.
Take another look around you, Wes.
That line there where she says, take another look around you, Wes, in the original footage he actually stuttered over a line and said, take a look around you, Wes. So when it came time to re-record, instead of getting him to do the stutter, we just replaced the first take with another, and it came out with take another look around you. Just one of the little ways you can fix up a performance afterwards, so you don't need to get it perfect on set, although it helps. One of the great things that you can do when you're editing digitally is play with the colours a lot, and you may notice in this scene, especially if you go through and fast forward, is that the colours actually change from the beginning of the scene to the end, which I tried to simulate the sun coming up. And all through the movie, the colours were very important to what I was trying to get across, from the very rich red sunsets to the very cold blue forests and all of that's very simple and easy to do when you're editing digitally. The whole film was cut using Final Cut Pro, and most of the effects were done using Commotion, and a few were done using After Effects, and Photoshop was pretty handy as well, which are all just off-the-shelf software packages that you can run out and buy in most shops. I'm not so sure Commotion's being supported anymore, but it's still a great package, especially for rotoscoping and tedious jobs like that. This location here at the lighthouse here was, we had an old fort, old rundown fort lined up to use, and I think about a week before we were planning to shoot, they pulled out on us and said we couldn't shoot there anymore. So with a week to find a location, I just frantically drove around everywhere and came across this lighthouse, and I thought it would fit perfectly. I actually think it fits better than the fort now, so it's funny how things turn out. This scene here with Jose and Jamie, Cameron Plant and Jamie Wilson, were never there at the same time. We couldn't get them together on the same day, so it's actually different dates. So you'll see when you see Cameron, it's bright sunshine, and when you see Jamie, it's actually overcast. But even still, you don't pick it when you're into the film and watching it, which is good. You just think they're talking to each other. This whole end action sequence was great fun filming it. We had all the elements. We had Clint doing the cable work to get Jamie flying through the air, and we had explosions going off down the beach, and plus I had to have my cameo appearance as well, which was a little painful when it came time to edit, and suddenly being confronted with the fact that I'm not as cool as I thought I looked. This fight sequence that I did with Daryl here, when we were rehearsing in the morning, I managed to land wrong on some hard sand and dislocated my shoulder, which was fun when it came time to actually film it, which is my excuse for why it looks so wimpy with my roll. The rest of the action though came up great. That bit where Jamie's getting lifted up by the alien Sumerian, who was actually sitting on Chris's shoulders, and when he went to lift him up, Chris just stood up, which is a good way to show how low-tech effects can work just as good as the high-tech ones. You might notice in the background of a couple of these shots as well, where the people are running down the beach, you can see a truck and a windsurfer right in the background, which nobody picked up, and I don't think anyone's picked it up yet. I noticed it when we had it finally screened, when it was all finished and it was screened on the big screen. I saw it and thought, crap, hope no one else sees it. But now I guess everyone will see it. I remember these explosions that are going off down the beach. We had a shot set up, and just as I was about to call action, this seagull flew down and landed right on top of where the explosives were buried, and everyone just sort of held their breath for a moment, seeing what would happen to the seagull. Of course it flew off and it was okay. One of the things we had a lot of fun with was creating a lot of the sound effects for the movie. Myself and Colin Paxman, same Colin that built the models, did most of the work on that, and we'd grab the oddest sounds and mess with them in Pro Tools and get them create complete new sounds. I think one of the best examples of this is back in the Fort Fergus scene. The eerie soundscape that you hear, I actually got a sound of a baby crying, and then played with it and added echoes and reverb and slowed it down and twisted it all about, and it gives this really kind of haunting soundscape. There's just a small stunt coming up where Daryl, yet again, falls over the wall playing the drunk, and it's actually, out of all the stunts he did, this one right here, it's the only time he ever hurt himself. He smashed his knee on the concrete as he fell, and I always give him a hard time about it, that he did all these crazy stunts throughout the whole film, and the one where he gets hurt is just falling off a little wall. The band that we had playing here is a band called Seren, and we got in touch with them. They were one of the guys was a brother to the guy that we had doing our props, looking after all our props. And when we were asking around for a band, he said that he knew one, and they turned out perfect for what we were looking for.
Of a new dawn.
Next stop, Exa.
The reference that Fergus makes there to Exa is actually a reference from the original script, where their whole mission is to get back to this mega city where all of the world's technology remains, which is called Exa. And from there they mount this final stand against the Chryslims and reclaim the Earth, which may be made into a movie one day, may not. Well, that's the end of our little journey. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there's been some insight with this commentary and I haven't bored you too much. and thanks for listening.
When everything I knew is old, I can't believe it all went wrong. I'm stuck somewhere I don't belong, lost inside this blackened earth. It seems to me that we're all cursed. I cannot change what I've become. I feel like my life's undone. Shown there's nothing left that is my own. I don't know where it all went wrong. I'm lost somewhere I don't belong, searching through this blackened earth, alone inside this universe. I never thought this day would come. It seems to me this world's undone. By tyranny, I don't think I understand the truth behind all that I am. I seek what I will never find. It tears the fabric of my mind, rescued from this blackened earth. It's so much more than I deserve. I won't repent what I've become. The seeds of hate can't be undone.